My name is Arezou Azad. I'm the director of the Invisible East program based at the University of Oxford, which reconstructs the lives of ordinary people living in a region that comprises today parts of Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan.
And these people lived at a time when the first Muslims arrived here in the 8th century and consolidated their authority over the region. And our period ends in the 13th century when the first Mongols arrived to the region. And this region had still a majority non-Muslim population to a large extent. And we call it the Islamicate East because there is no single word that comprises or that describes this region in any better way that we can think of. And our work has been made possible thanks to the generous support of the British Arts and Humanities Research Council and the European Research Council. The invisible in the invisible East are the people, the ordinary people who are living in this region of the Islamicate East. And they are people who have not been written about in the history books. So the history books, and we have lots of important books and chronicles and biographical dictionaries and so on that were written at this time. But they tell us about rulers and their entourage, their immediate entourage. We learn about palace intrigues, we learn about generals, we learn about interactions between queens and their staff, but we don't learn about ordinary people. So these were people who were living in the countryside, and that's the majority by far of the population was living in the countryside. So if you think about it that way, we know almost nothing about the majority of the population in this region during this 500-year period. So these are the invisible people that come to life, and we learn about the strategies that they employed when dealing, especially when dealing with taxes, which is really the main way that a citizen or an ordinary person would have dealt with the state. We use documents, and documents are very different from the usual source that has been used when studying this region and this period. The usual source I mentioned are chronicles. There are other sort of narrative histories, biographical dictionaries, and so on. And these were written, usually patronized by a ruler, written for the eyes and ears of the ruler. So you can imagine that these works tell us about life from a very particular elite perspective. But what we are using are documents, and these documents were written at village level for people living at village level, and they are largely receipts that were issued once the farmers would deliver their taxes in kind. They usually were delivered as grains. They include contracts that were drawn up when people bought different plots of land or rented different plots of land. They include marriage contracts. They include sheets of paper that talk about divorce. So these, and this is divorce of regular people. They include documents that tell us about the relationship between Muslims and Jews at this countryside level. So they give us a real slice of life, if you want, at the countryside. And that's really, really special. And so far, we've been deprived of that, with a few very notable but small exceptions. We've been deprived of this view into the lives and the minds of people living in the countryside. This is really important because I think, especially in the current climate of what's happening in the region, where you have popular movements, you have popular uprisings, you have this tension between the ordinary citizens, if you will, and the state. And there's a lot that you can learn from these documents that we're working with on how people managed these sometimes difficult relations. And that's why currently we don't have much to go on when we want to compare with history, other than what's been written from the perspective of the state. Well, these documents give us the perspective of the citizen, of the taxpayer, and the different strategies that that person applied, the way these people also formed groups with other people, and how they used their power, if you want, their soft power, to represent themselves, to represent their own interests. That's why I think it's very important. We are really scratching the surface, and we're very much starting with a relatively clean slate. This kind of documentary research of documents coming from the Eastern Islamic world is really very much in its infancy. That said, we've been in a really privileged position to be able to interact with our colleagues who've been working on documents from Egypt and Syria, where there's a much longer tradition of scholarship that goes back 2, 3, 4 generations. And they have already developed some really useful tools, and some of them we were able to adapt to our needs. This includes typologies, for example, of documents. It also, for us specifically, has included developing a glossary of terms, because especially for the Persian ones, many of them are the oldest Persian writing in the original in the world. And so we've had to develop a glossary for terms where we were not sure what they meant because their usage is so old. And we had nothing or very little to compare with. And then having developed these sort of foundational stones, we've been able to start recreating, reconstructing the social history of these ordinary lives. And we are currently in the process of developing our books, which will be coming out in the next 2 to 3 years in a series that we have developed together with Edinburgh University Press called the Islamicate East series. So it's something to look out for. But we're also looking forward to building that up beyond the next 2 to 3 years, which is the lifetime of our current grants, and building it up into more and more in-depth analysis of what's happening here. There's so much to learn, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to build up this completely different perspective on the history of the region of the Islamicate East.